very momentous for me this evening to have this opportunity to be introducing Rabbi Keleman. For the last 5 years, I had the opportunity of being a part of Rabbi Keleman's kollel in Jerusalem, a kollel that he founded to train rabbinic leaders to make a big difference in Klal Yisrael. I had the privilege of learning from Rabbi Keleman. I had the privilege of hearing his worldviews, but most importantly, I had the privilege of observing Rabbi Keleman and his very unique middos. Rabbi Keleman has his finger on the pulse of the issues facing Klal Yisrael today. Whether it be the national issues, the communal issues, or the personal issues, Rabbi Keleman understands and is aware of everything that is facing the full spectrum of Jewish society in modern today. Many Rabbanim, many community leaders, laymen, they turn to Rabbi Keleman for advice, for support. They turn to him for solutions in solving the issues that they're facing. However, the trademark of Rabbi Keleman is not his Torah knowledge, it's not his understanding of medicine or science or psychology. After being in the presence of Rabbi Keleman for 5 years, I can tell you that the trademark of Rabbi Keleman is his unique ability to care for others. He cares about the individual, he cares about the communities, and he cares about Klal Yisrael. He's a personification of the holy words of the Nefesh HaChaim, of the introduction to the Nefesh HaChaim, of the Chaim Volozhiner, that says that the purpose of man's existence in this world is to be there, is to care, is simply to exist for other people. Rabbi Keleman therefore doesn't just have his finger on the pulse when it comes to the issues facing Klal Yisrael today. These issues are pumping through Rabbi Keleman's heart. His energy and his mind and his time are completely engulfed in the issues facing Klal Yisrael. This last Shabbos, I had the opportunity of spending a meal together with a very special woman. It wasn't my wife. She's a mother, she's a strong mother, she's a mother who's in a lot of pain. Just over a year and a half ago, this mother lost her 13-year-old son. It was unlike Bo'emer, and it was in Meron. This mother is a student of Rabbi Keleman, a student of Rabbi Keleman for the last 15 years. And over the meal, she recalled how the first workshop that she attended, that was led by Rabbi Keleman. And he started off the workshop in a very strange way. He got up in front of the crowd, in front of the audience, and he turned to them and he made a request. Rabbi Keleman asked, please, if there's anyone here this evening who has come to be entertained, I ask you please to leave now. We're not here to be entertained. We're here to work, and we're here to grow. While I don't have the boldness or the audacity to make such a request this evening, I do urge all of us to hear, to learn, to grow from what Rabbi Keleman has to share with us this evening. Which is with that, I'd like to ask Rabbi Keleman to address us.
Good evening. Okay, I was not going to tell the story, but since everyone else is telling stories, I'm going to tell a story too. Many years ago, there was a presidential race in the United States between John F. Kennedy and Nixon. And John F. Kennedy won. But Nixon was invited to the installation ceremony where John F. Kennedy was going to give his famous speech. Asks not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. This is a true story. John F. Kennedy got up, Nixon was sitting on the stage, and he gave the speech and received this rousing standing ovation. When everyone was walking off the stage, Nixon walked up to the speechwriter and he said, I have to tell you, there is one line from that speech that I wish I would have had the opportunity to say. And the speechwriter said, ask not what you can do for your country. And he said, no, I do solemnly swear. So I wish that all the stories about me were true, but they're not necessarily true. But I am very, very honored to come tonight and speak to you, and I hope I'll share something valuable with you. I'm going to start with a metaphor. Many years ago, when I first graduated college, my wife and I went off on an adventure. We traveled through Europe for several months. Eventually, we made our way to Israel, but we traveled through Europe. And on the way, we stopped at the Matterhorn. And I remember waking up in the morning, and I remember looking up at the Matterhorn, and I couldn't breathe. It was so spectacular, so overwhelming. A few times in my life, I've had such an experience. You look at it, and it is so unusual that it's breathtaking. Not like anything else, so strange. What's interesting is that when I looked around at the locals who live in Zermatt, they look at the Matterhorn all the time and their glance just moves right past it. It doesn't affect them at all. It's as if they don't see what I'm seeing. And I imagine the same is true about Mont Blanc. I imagine the same is true about some of the most spectacular, unusual places on planet Earth. If you fish, don't notice the ocean. How can you not notice an ocean? But fish don't necessarily notice an ocean. It's just the place where you live. So, in many ways, we are so at home in the world of Torah that we don't notice what's unusual, what's bizarre, what stands out, which is not like anything else in the world. And because we don't notice, we might not appreciate entirely. So what I want to do tonight is I want to take you and zoom out and get some real distance on your religion and point out some things about Judaism which I think objectively could be called bizarre. I'll give you an example. I think it's fair to say that Judaism is literally obsessed with tiny, itsy, bitsy, little details. I'm going to give you one example. I have in front of me the candle lighting time for this coming Shabbos. I pulled this off myzmanim.com. I'm not exaggerating. It says there that candle lighting in Modi'in this coming Shabbos is, not candle lighting, I'm sorry, Shkia in Modi'in this coming Shabbos is 4:42 and 50 seconds. Okay, now, 4:42 and 50 seconds in Modi'in, but not in Modi'in Elite. In Modi'in Elite, it's 4:42 and 32 seconds. In Masua, 4:40 and 32 seconds. Ramla is 4:43 and 19 seconds. Rishon LeZion is 4:43 and 31 seconds. Now, if you ask somebody, like, when does the Jewish Sabbath start? They'll tell you at sunset. It starts at sunset, when the sun sets. But by us, that's not how we think. MyZmanim is a website that Orthodox Jews go to all over the world, and supply and demand, they demand to know 4:42 and 50 seconds. By the way, if you're a rabbi, you can actually get decimal places. Yes? And that's because we demand it. Now, what is that? What is that? You all know. Orthodox Jews put on their right shoe before their left shoe. They tie their left shoe before their right shoe, unless you happen to be a woman, in which case there's a machlokas. When you cut your nails, it's this one, 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 and specifically on certain days. There's no aspect of this religion which doesn't take the tail down to the picayune. By us, we yawn through it, of course. But that's not the way that most of the world thinks. That's not the way that most of the world's religions operate. Recognize that. Why are Orthodox Jews so obsessed with tiny itsy bitsy detail? I want to talk about another bizarre aspect of this incredible mountain that we're looking at. When Orthodox Jews pray, it has a very distinctive appearance. When Orthodox Jews pray, you can always tell. You see them in an airport, you see them in a park, you know the person's praying. Why? Because they first do this dance, and then, right, there is the, yes? So now, that is not the way that people pray. There are people who pray in the Christian world. It's all contemplation within. It's an internal process, which it should be. God can read my heart. He knows what's going on. So in the Christian world, it's all an internal process. In the Muslim world, it's a loud yelling to the master of the universe and then an entirely silent process. But this business of whispering words to him, that doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist in any other religion on the planet. It's strange. It's actually really strange. If you think the words, you didn't pray. You're not Yotzi Tefillah. Why? Why do you have to say the words in a whisper? Okay. Why such an obsession with detail? Why do Orthodox Jews think the words have to be said, but in a whisper? Because we have limited time tonight, I'm only going to get through one more bomb question, but I think this is the bomb of all bombs. There has never been a people in all of human history that produced a book with the intellectual rigor of the Talmud. It doesn't exist anyplace. The Talmud is the most logical, the most precise of all documents ever written. By the way, I say that with some authority. My undergraduate degree was in 17th century Christian literature. I got it from the University of California, and in order to get that degree, I read about 1,000 pages a week of the finest literature ever written, and I did that for 4 years. So if it was written in English, and it was considered fine literature, I read it. And then, about 6 months after I graduated, I fell into a yeshiva. And I remember sitting over a page of tractate Ksuvas, thinking, I have never seen anything like this in my life. Nothing. There's no comparison between the intellectual rigor of the Talmud and any other literature that's ever been produced. By the way, forget about popular literature, legal literature. There is no legal literature with the depth, the precision, the intricateness, the cross-references over that vast a literature studied by an entire nation for thousands of years. We are a logic-obsessed people. And yet, here's question number 3. Where did we all start? How did this ball get rolling? So it was 3,300 years ago, at a mountain in the Sinai Desert. And there, God appeared and made his presence known to us. It was clear that we were about to get the Torah. And our response was, Nasa v'nishma. We'll do it, even if we don't understand it. Now, what is that? We started with the blindest leap of faith in history. By the way, the Talmud makes fun of us. The Talmud says we're a passionate people driven by our emotions, right? We immediately jumped into this. We had no idea what we were getting into. Every other nation that was off in the Torah said, tell me what's in it first. The Jews said, do you want the Torah? Nasa v'nishma. We'll do it even if we don't understand it. Completely emotional, irrational. How could it be that the root of the most scientific, most logical religion ever in history starts off with a religious leap of faith off a cliff? Why such an obsession with detail? Why do they think we need to say the words? And how could a religion as rationally grounded as us have started with a complete blind leap of faith? I had all these questions. I had a lot more, but I'm not going to bore you tonight. But these 3 I thought you'd appreciate. These were my questions. Many years after these questions occurred to me, I had found enough of value in Torah to make my way to Yerushalayim. And there, I heard about a great sage who was going to be giving a lecture. My 2 Rosh Yeshiva were headed to the lecture. And I wanted to see, who do my Rosh Yeshiva listen to? So I asked them if I could come along. And they said, sure. And I jumped in the car and we went to this place. And I remember when we got to the place, there were huge Talmidei Chacham, giant Torah scholars from all across the city who had descended on this base medrash. There was a crowd trying to get in a very small door. As I walked in, I saw a lot of very bright, very friendly faces. One fellow said to me, there's no chairs, but just go stand against the back wall. And I very naively followed the crowd towards the back wall. When I got to the back wall, I saw the entire back wall was already covered. But another friendly guy just grabbed me, flipped me around, and stood me on his feet, which I felt bad about until someone came and stood on my feet. We were 3 deep in the back. The room was packed. And Rabbi Shlomo Volba got up and started to talk. Everybody else in the room, it seemed, was nonchalant about his primary points. And my mouth was on the ground. Rav Volba was in the middle of his winter series, and the theme of his winter series was that the entire purpose of the giving of the Torah, the meaning behind all 5 books of Moses, the ultimate intention of 60 volumes of Talmud, the reason the Jews were chosen and sent out to mankind, the purpose of the universe is closeness, connection, intimacy, oneness. He said God creates 2s so that we will create 1s. Our job is to imitate God and create unity. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. He's one. He's a unity. That is perfection. And anything that is not unified is less than perfection. Divisiveness, distance, isolation. That's the essence of evil. And God created the universe so that we would help mankind walk into connection. I had a lot more questions when I walked into that base midrash that night. As I walked out, I used to keep a little notebook in my pocket with all of my questions. I pulled out my notebook and I started thumbing through the pages, and I was realizing that page after page of these questions had just disappeared. And I remember I ran home. My wife saw my face. She said, "Have a seat." And I said, "Listen to this." And I started running through all the discussions that we had had over those years, all the things that bothered us. And I showed her what things look like through this new lens. I'm going to try to share that with you right now. So, don't want to give away my age here, but I have been doing marriage counseling for more than 30 years. And in 30 years of marriage counseling, we're talking literally hundreds of couples. I've seen that there are certain trends, there are certain patterns that happen in marriages. And some of these patterns are counterintuitive. They weren't the sorts of things that I thought I would discover when I started counseling people. For example, I have never yet, in 30 years plus of marriage counseling, I have never yet met a couple whose relationship was on the rocks. Most of the people who come to me are having some sort of a difficulty. I've never yet met one couple whose relationship was on the rocks because of what you or I would call objectively a major issue. Like, what would I expect? I would expect, she's Likud, I'm Meretz, I'm out. Yes? I would understand if that happened. Yeah? I'm religious, she's non-religious, this can't work. I've never experienced that. That never happened in 30 plus years. You name it. The sorts of gargantuan disagreements that you would expect to fracture relationships, they may be an excuse, they may get mentioned at some point, but when push comes to shove, that's not what she's upset about. What are they really upset about? So, real life stories. The real life stories are things like this. We've been married for 10 years. Every single time he orders pizza, he asks me, "What toppings do you want?" Every single time I tell him the same thing and he doesn't remember. Truly, a cause for a relationship breaking up. A man told me that for years, he has asked his wife after dinner every night, "What's for dessert?" And every night she says to him, "Did you want dessert?" We have couples that are divorcing over pizza and dessert. I had a couple who came to me. The fellow had just started to grow a beard. And he told me, "That's it, I'm walking out on the marriage now." So I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "She doesn't like the beard." So I said, "You must be kidding." I said, "We're going to shave the beard. Are you crazy?" So he said, "It's not the beard." He said, "That's the straw that broke the camel's back." And then he named a bunch of other little things like that over years that made him crazy. I wouldn't have confidence if I only met the couples that were in trouble. But I also occasionally meet couples that are doing terrific. And I see confirmation of this pattern there. When a couple's doing really, really well, I'll notice that he doesn't say, "By the way, honey, dinner was good." He says, "The meat was really tender. Was that pine nuts on the salad? He doesn't say to her, wow, I like the sweater. He says, what are those things? Those are gemstones? Those are pearls? What is that? What's on the sweater there? What is that? He notices little tiny things. Over the years, what I've seen is that all relationships rise, crash, based on tiny, itsy, bitsy little things. And after a few years of counseling couples, I felt like a fool. Of course, this is so obvious, this is so true. Anyone could have figured this out. Why? Let's say that I remember her 25th anniversary. So, that's not impressive. If I forget the 25th anniversary, I should be shot, yeah? But the fact that I remember the 25th anniversary, that's not impressive. How could you miss the 25th anniversary? But if I remember that 25 years ago, I took Hannah out for the first time. And I remember when I took her out, she told me that she liked salmon. She ordered the salmon that night. And over dinner, some other things came out, right? She told me that she really liked yellow roses. And she liked yellow roses with a lot of that white poof stuff that the florist put in the top. And she liked a lavender ribbon on yellow roses. If 25 years later, when of course I take her out for our anniversary, if when we arrive, the maitre d' says, Keleman's, your table's waiting for you. They bring us in, sit us down. And immediately, the waitress says, Mrs. Keleman, you wanted the salmon? And the maitre d' walks over with a dozen yellow roses with a lot of the white poof stuff and a lavender ribbon. That shows that I love her, because otherwise, why would I remember that? It's the attention to the little tiny things that indicates you care. If you really care, you pay attention. And it goes a step deeper than that. Rav Dessler writes that the more that somebody gives, the more that they love. It's nice when somebody gives to me, makes me happy. But when I give to somebody else, I love them. It actually draws me into the relationship emotionally. When I pay attention to the little tiny itsy bitsy things, because I'm hungry to know what can I give to her, that will help me fall in love. The fact that I care is indicated by how much attention I pay to detail. The fact that I'm hungry to know the details, that means I want to fall in love. And God says, that's your mission, Jews. Your job is to bring love into the world. Unity, connection, relationship. And therefore, you need to train your brain. You need to go into a training program. There need to be exercises. What we're going to do is we're going to give you dozens, hundreds of these exercises that make you pay attention to little tiny itsy bitsy detail. We'll give you 3, 4, 5, 613 categories of these exercises, divided up into thousands and thousands of little itsy bitsy actions. And at every moment you'll have to ask, what's his preference? What is he like? What can I get for him? What can I do for him? A religious Jew is constantly tuned into what's his preference. We live, and we are aware of it, we live in 3 arenas simultaneously. Love arenas. On the one hand, I have this passionate relationship I'm trying to develop with the Master of the Universe. On the other hand, There's something happening between me and other people, especially my spouse. And we're aware there's a third arena as well, which is the body is not the same as the soul. There are two separate creatures. We don't notice it so much here. Before we were created, the soul was out up there, the body was created down here, the soul was dropped into the body. Then it dwells in the body for a period. At death, the body goes one place, the soul goes to another. They have different experiences, completely different experiences. Then they get back together at Tchias HaMesim. There's two creatures here, the body and the soul. It's possible in that marriage not even to be aware that I have a partner. I might not even be aware that there's someone I'm married to that I'm living with constantly, that I have to attend to. My body likes ice cream. My neshama likes to learn Torah. They have to cooperate with each other. What do you like? How can I take care of you? There's three different arenas. In all three arenas, the rules for falling in love and being successful in that intimacy are the same. Rule number one, detail. Rule number two, why do you have to say the words? God doesn't know what's in my heart. So, over all these years of counseling, I noticed that there are fundamental differences between men and women. We are not the same. To call us the same species is a stretch. We function differently in almost every way. One way which caught my attention in recent years is men and women use language differently. When I say we use language differently, I mean that in many, many ways, but I'll give you one illustration of it. I could actually do it 1 hour just on the way men and women use language. It's hysterical, but I'm not going to do it for you right now. One way in which we use language differently is men tend to use language to resolve a problem, an intellectual problem, a physical problem. Excuse me, could you pass the ketchup? No, I'm going to take out the trash. Who's paying the water bill? This is all very masculine language. Men talk when there's a problem, when there's something that needs to be resolved, when something needs to be clarified. Let me make this perfectly clear. That's classic male speech. By the way, so much that they call it mansplaining. Women do not necessarily use speech just to solve problems. Although men will use female language and women will use male language, and I'll describe in a minute what the difference is, but men are dominant when it comes to problem solving with their language. Women are dominant in another way. Women use language to draw close to each other, to develop a relationship. I'll explain how that works. We quoted Rav Dessler before saying, the more that you give, the more that you love. Okay, makes sense. Now, what's the most precious thing that you can give? The more precious the thing that you let go of, the more you're giving. Obviously, if I hand you my trash, I haven't given you anything. The most precious thing that I can give is when I reach inside of myself and I open up and I share me with you. That is extraordinary giving. Women very often, when they want to draw close to each other, will share something private with each other. And they'll talk to each other, and through the act of speaking, not through the act of listening necessarily, through the act of speaking, they feel closer to the one that they're speaking to. When I've shared something with you, I feel closer to you because I've given you something. And the more that you give, the more that you love. Gentlemen, stand by for just a second. I want to ask a question to the ladies. Ladies, Have you ever been involved in a conversation with a woman, and in that conversation, she mentioned the same detail twice? Has that ever happened? Everyone's nodding. Okay. Every 3 times? Okay. Ever seen 2 ladies walking down the street and they're both talking simultaneously? Okay. That's not because they don't know how to communicate. It's because they're both very vigorously trying to share with each other. And the more that you give, the more that you love, and it's very exciting. And I'll tell you this, and I'll tell you this, and I'll tell you this. By the way, this can be very frustrating in a conversation with a man. He comes home from work, and she says, today at work, this happened to me. She says, this happened to me, and this happened to me, and I was under in this tension with this other person at work, and then we worked it all out, and I felt so much better. How was your day? And he says, good. At which point, she wants to grab him by the collar, shake him, and say, talk to me! Now why? Why does she want to hear him talk? The answer is, because she knows that the more that he opens up and tells her what's going on inside of him, the closer he will feel to her. Just like she feels close to him when she opens up. Why do we have to say the words? I actually didn't understand it until one night. I kept going back to Revolva's lectures. And every night I walked out of Revolva's base midrash, my mind was spinning. He turned the world upside down. He was one of the most extraordinary creatures to walk planet Earth during my lifetime. One night, Revolva got up. He put together all the Torah sources, and he demonstrated for us. It's important for a couple to spend private time. So, I was sure I must have misunderstood the lecture. That was clear to everybody in the room, I'm sure, before he got up and spent 45 minutes persuading us of that. So I went up to Revolva after the lecture, and I said, tonight, the lesson was I should spend private time with my wife? Yes. So I said, at that point I realized, okay, so I don't know what he's talking about then. I said, I understand what private time means to me. Kvod HaMashkiach. What does private time mean to you? What does it look like when I spend private time? So I remember he looked at me like, wow, you're a bigger idiot than I thought. And then he said, you ever take your wife out? So I said, yeah. So he said, the next time you take her out, by the way, at this point, I was teaching at Neve Yerushalayim. I had about 900 students in Jerusalem at the time. He said, the next time you take your wife out, find a restaurant where there are none of your students. He says, call in advance and have them set up a table where you'll be facing her, looking right into her face. And then he added, throughout the evening, you should whisper. So I said, why? So he said, don't you feel how small the room becomes when you whisper? I said, yeah. Okay, I went and I tried this. Highly recommended. Highly recommended. I came back the next week, absolutely sure that Revolva must have been studying psychology books in the bathroom. I went up to him and I said, Kvod HaMashkiach, where did you get that? It was a sea change in my life. It was one of those moments that I point back to where everything changed. He said, where did I get it? I got it in Shulchan Aruch. I said, where? Hilchos dating? He said, no, right here. He pulled off Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, opened it up to the laws of prayer. He says, look what it says here. It says, when you want to create a moment of intimacy, this happens to be talking about with God, but it doesn't make a difference. It's always the same rules. When you want to create a moment of intimacy, take 3 steps back from the whole world. Go find a restaurant where there's none of your students. Then take 3 steps forward. Sit right in front of her. And throughout the evening, you should whisper. You have to talk. You have to open up. You have to give what's inside of you. You have to share. That's how you fall in love. And the reason you whisper is to make it an intimate sharing, a closeness. Why such an obsession with the tail? Because the tail is where love happens. Why do you have to say the words? Because saying the words, giving of yourself, that's how you fall in love. And we do it with whispering to create the right environment. But why would a nation whose path in history was going to be defined by intellect, logic, rigor intellectually, why would our very starting point be a blind leap of faith? Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll do it even if we don't understand it. So, years ago, this is many years ago, a few decades ago, I was a teacher at Neve Yerushalayim College for Women in Jerusalem. Extraordinary wonderland where miracles happen on a daily basis. I was teaching a series based on my Rebbe's teachings. It was a series about relationships and how to be successful in relationships. And I had a bunch of different topics that I covered over the period of 6 weeks. That day, I was trying to explain the concept of giving in or not giving in to irrational requests. There's a very widespread belief among people in the West that when your spouse makes an irrational request, you should not cooperate. The reason you should not cooperate is because you're giving in to insanity. We do not cooperate with insanity. It's not good for them, it's not good for us. And therefore, we do not cooperate with irrational requests. That is a widespread Western belief. The Torah's position is diametrically opposed. The Torah says, you are not a cerebrum. You have feelings, you have emotional needs. There's a whole person inside there. There's a child, there's an adult, there's a parent, there's a brother, there's a sister, there's all this stuff happening. And not all of it is rational. The Torah's position is we take care of someone's needs. As long as they're not asking for something which is destructive or self-destructive, we take care of them. So I was giving this lecture on cooperating with irrational requests when there's a knock on the door. This angel of a secretary who worked all the decades that I worked at Neve Yerushalayim, she was our secretary. She had come up from downstairs. She opened the door and she said, Rabbi Keleman, I'm so sorry. It's an urgent message from your wife. And he hands me a note. So I took the note from her and I opened it up. And the note said, Labe, on the way home from work, please, double underline, pick up 2 bags of seaweed. So I folded up the note and I finished my lecture on giving in to irrational requests. I then walked out of the classroom, walked back towards my office, got my valise, and started walking down the hill of Neve Yerushalayim, thinking, where am I going to get seaweed? I remember at the time there was only 2 health food stores that would carry that kind of a product in Yerushalayim. So I got on a bus, and as I'm on the bus, I go into this fantasy. And I'm imagining if a person knew nothing about relationships, how would they respond to a note like this? She doesn't say why she wants seaweed. That's a crazy thing to ask for. Okay, I imagine, at the time I didn't have a cell phone, but I can imagine like if someone had a cell phone, they would dial on their cell phone or stop at a payphone. We had asimonim in those days, tells you how old I am, yes. Pop an asimonin, Chana, what is going on? Are you kidding? Seaweed, did they spell it properly? What do you want? But imagine I call and there's no answer. Well, if there's no answer and she's asking for something crazy, I'm certainly not going to get it for her. I imagine someone saying something like that. Then I come out of my fantasy and I'm sitting on a bus on the way to downtown Jerusalem. And I'm in reality again. And the reality is that I have a very precious list. I know Hannah loves yellow roses. I know she loves lavender ribbon and a lot of the white poof stuff. When I met my wife, she was the first woman I had ever met who actually preferred carob over chocolate. Seaweed was a new one for me. But I was so excited. I had no idea how to like seaweed. Great, fantastic.